The design program I use is called Affinity Designer. And this is the version 1 that I have. The current version is version 2, and there is a slight difference with how it looks. There might be some added features that I currently don't know about. I have used version 2. It is roughly similar to version 1. So if you do end up getting version 2, you can still use this tutorial. This won't be a full in-depth tutorial on every aspect of Affinity Designer, as I haven't used all its features. As we open up Affinity Designer, you'll see this is what it looks like. And we don't have access to the tools on this side here. And as you can see on this side here, a lot of these can't be used at this point. What we're going to do is go over to File and click New. And then as you can see, we have our different options that we can select. A4 is the more common printing form, so we're going to select A4, but if you want to select another size, you can. This is the page width and the page height, and you can put a custom page width in there if you like, and a custom page height if you like as well. So just say, for example, we're going to do 500 by 500. You can do that as well. And then we'll just reselect A4. The DPI we don't need to worry about. The document units, I leave it at millimeters because millimeters is quite a precise measurement. And then we have the orientation that we can change if we like. And as you can see, as we change, the page width and page height change as well. We don't need to worry about any of this, and all this we don't need to worry about. I'll show you the Artboard tool as we move on in the tutorial. We don't need to worry about any of this up here. So just select A4 and then whichever orientation you want, and then just click Create. As you can see, we have A4 has popped up on the screen, and now our tools have become available, and now we can start making our pattern. And you might notice we have these three options up here. We have the designer persona, the pixel persona, and the export persona. And as we change ones, it changes the tools that are available. So just leave it on designer persona. That's what we want to use to design our patterns. With our tools here, we're going to be using the move tool, the artboard tool, the node tool, and if you see any of these little arrows next to any of these options, that just means that there is just another option behind it pretty much. We then have the corner tool, the pen tool, the different shapes, and again, as you can see, there's more shapes there. And then we have the frame text tool, and as you can see, there's another option behind that little arrow. And then we have the view tool and the zoom tool. We don't really need to use these two, but this just allows us to move around and zoom in. So they're just going to be the majority that we're going to be using to design our patterns. As you can see, we just use the zoom tool. We can actually zoom in ourselves. If we hold Control and scroll, we can zoom in. If we hold Shift, we can zoom left to right. We can also go down to this right side here, and it says Navigator, and you can zoom in here as well. And then just select Transform again. What we're going to do is select a rectangle, and then just make a rectangle. And as you can see, a rectangle is on the screen. And on our layers, we have a rectangle here. And then as you can see, it tells us on the x-axis where it is, on the y-axis, the rotation of it. So as you can see, it's on 0 degrees, and then the width, the height, and then you have the shear down here. We don't need to worry about the shear here. Over on this side here, we have the colors, so we can select the different colors we want. Here is this is the transparency of the pattern. So if we want to remove the transparency, we can go to 0. And then if you want to bring the transparency back up up, you can. Over here, we have two options. This is just the main color of the pattern. So we can change the main color here if we like. And then this one here is the line color. So as you can see, we can remove the line color capacity, but I wanted to select the main color here. If we remove the color here, we can see we actually don't have a line. So what I'm going to do is go down to stroke, go across the stroke, sorry, and I'm going to increase that line. And then as you can see, we have a 1 pt width of the line. For the most part, I like to leave the patterns with 0 capacity. The reason is when we start to layer the different rectangles, etc., it's just going to be much more easier to see all the lines through, as opposed to having, you know, completely white or grey or yellow or blue or whatever colors. For the most part, we don't actually need to worry about colors so much. If you want to select the color, you're more than welcome to, but it's not really needed to when you're designing patterns. If you go over to this box here and you go down to sliders, and then you go to RGBT hex, have that selected. Now, as you can see, as we change the color, this little box here, the hex code, changes. And every single color has a hex code to it. So if you want to find a specific hex color, you can simply just go on the internet and type in hex color for blue, hex color for royal blue, light blue, yellow, orange, red, green, etc., dark green, light green, and you can just find the hex code and put that in. But for the most part, we're just simply going to leave it as white and then just remove the capacity and just make it completely transparent, just so it's much more easy when we start to layer. You can see the colors and strokes on this side here as well. So same thing. You have the color wheel here. You have the RGB hex slider. Same thing as well on this side. Same with the stroke. Change the color, the width, all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty, you have both sides you can use. Now, as you can see, we still have the rectangle selected. So we can still move this if we want. However, we have the rectangle still selected. So simply just go over here and just select the move tool. Now, if you want to copy and paste, for example, it's pretty easy. Just right click, click copy, and then click paste, and then it'll just paste where it is. If you want to see some of the shortcut methods, you can just go to the edit up the top, and then you can just see the cut, copy, paste, and then the shortcut here. We just need to worry about copy, paste. You can cut if you want, but just copy and paste here. You don't need to worry about any of these special paste options. And then you have delete for backspace. Same with the undo and redo. So Control Z, Control Y, they're just some shortcuts that you can see. So as you can see, we copied and pasted it, and now we have another rectangle in our layer. And the higher it is, it just means that it's going to be above any of the ones below it. So anything below this rectangle is going to be below it. So this rectangle is on the top. And this is why I like to set the transparency to 0, just so it's much more easier to see all the way through to the different lines. And, you know, for example, it's not covering over the other lines. Now what we're going to do is, I'll just delete that. We're going to make the pattern of the minimalist wallet. And the width of the pattern was 79 by 101. And as you can see, it's much more easier to design a pattern on here compared to having to use a ruler, etc. The next thing we're going to do is if you remember when we did the graph paper, we moved the line in for the edge of the wallet to show where the trim allowance is, and then we moved it in again for the trim allowance. And we're going to do the exact same thing. So copy, paste, Control C, Control V. And because it's going to be on 4mm on both sides, we're going to minus 79 by 8, and that is 71. And as you can see, it's moved to the left. And then what we can do is just go to our x-axis. And I forgot to mention, so the x-axis is left to right, and the y-axis is up and down. And as you can see, as we move this across and up and down, the x and y-axis change. So I'll just Control Z and put it back to where it is. If you hold Shift, it maintains in a straight line. So it's very easy to move the pattern. Just move it back where it was. However, what I'm going to do is just go 21.1 plus 4. And then just move it across. And we did something wrong here. Oh, that was meant to be 25, not 24. And then if we hold Control, we can see the width from those two lines. And as you can see, it's 4 millimeters. Just make sure you actually keep, if you have any 0.1s or whatever, if you have a point number, just make sure you keep that point number in, because if you just go 25, for example, then you measure it again, it's going to be out by 1. So just make sure that you have that extra number on the end if that is where your x-axis is. Exact same thing on the height, except for we're going to be decreasing it by 4 because we don't have any trim allowance at the top. So 101 minus 4 is 97. And as you can see, it's moved up. Next thing again, we're going to copy paste, and then we're going to do our stitch line. And our stitch line is going to be 3 millimeters from the end, from the edge. So we're going to remove 6 millimeters on the sides. And 71 minus 6 is 65. So then we just move again by 3, well, by 3 this time. 25, 26, 27, 28. And then there we go. Same thing on the height, except for we're just going to minus it by 3. So 97 minus 3 is 94. And there we go. Now, if you remember, when we used our pricking irons on the graph paper, we could actually see where the pricking iron started and went into the corner, to this corner, and then back up to the top. Now, we don't have the luxury of using our pricking irons on the laptop screen, and I don't recommend that because you'll ruin the screen, of course. But if we go over to stroke here, and I should mention we don't need to worry about swatches or brushes or anything like that. If you go over to stroke, we can actually change the solid line to a dash line, and there we go. And if we zoom right in, we can see the dashes here. Now this is where it gets very interesting, because what I like to do next is change the cap to a butt cap. And what that does is it just makes it to a square, because when we have this and then we have this, it doesn't really give a good pricking iron stitch hole roughly where it would go, sort of thing. So I just choose the butt cap with the join. So this just means on the corner. So we scroll the way down, but this just gives a different join on the end. I just choose the miter join on the end, I think it is. Yeah, the miter join, that's what I'm, just because it gives a sharp corner. So I use the miter join. And then with this align one here, this just shows where the squares are. So if they're in line with that line, if they're inside of that line, if they're outside of that line. Now, the next thing is this dash here. So we have 1-100. And you don't need to worry about these two here, just these two. And what this means is that there is going to be in between this one here, and then so it's going to be this box, it's going to be that one, and then that one here, it's going to be that one, and then the next box is going to be back to this one. And then you can obviously add more if you like. So what we want to do is we want to have it on 1. The lowest it can actually go is 0.5. However, I think that's a bit too small. 1 is one is good to have. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in the second one our pricking iron size. And the size that I use is 2.82 millimeters. So that's going to make what our pricking iron space is in between there. I think it actually is from here to here, I believe it is. But I'll just have to double check. But all we need to know is we just need to put our pricking iron size in there. Now the next thing is going to be the more interesting thing depending on the pricking iron size that you use. And what I had to do is when I was trying to figure all this out, I had to count on the graph paper the pricking irons from the top here all the way to the corner here. And then I had to just go through the different widths until I found what number worked out. And what worked out for me was changing this width to 2.1. Sorry, you have to have it selected. 2.1. And then this is what worked for me. So this gives exactly the number of stitch holes that I had on the graph paper from here all the way to the bottom here. So now that I know that the width is 2.1, I can use this for all different other patterns. So that's just one thing to remember. That's one thing to consider. What you'll notice as well in regards to all this is you can see that we have all this at the top here. And of course we're not going to be stitching through the top here either. And because I'm using a 2.82 millimeter pricking iron, and I want a 3 millimeter gap between the first pricking iron and the edge here, I'm going to have this little box here. And that's quite annoying because I don't want that to be seen, etc. And there was two ways that I did try and remove all this sort of stuff. The first one was actually breaking this line. So breaking the line here, and then removing that. However, I found that when I did that, it pushed these line up. So this box here was moved up. So I don't recommend breaking the line here. What I recommend is actually covering this piece over up here with a white rectangle, but I'll show you that in soon. I'm just going to address the line here first before we move on to that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just get another rectangle and make it a solid line. And I'm going to measure it at 3 by 3. I'm just going to line it up as best I can along this line. I think that's actually pretty good. Might just check the corner here. Yeah, that looks pretty in line. So this is going to be a 3 millimeter. So essentially what we want is to have our piece, our first pricking iron, to be 3 millimeters from the edge here. And as you can see, the piece here is a little bit, I think it's 3.5. So yes, about 3.5. So that's a very tiny difference, but we just want to try and get as accurate as we can, just so we can just see hypothetically where the pricking irons would go. Because you don't want to be making a pattern, for example, and you think, okay, you spend hours on the pattern, and then you print it out, and then you work on it, and then you realize, oh well, my pricking iron doesn't actually line up in the corner. It drops short or goes a bit too far. So the purpose of this is just to get where exactly our pricking irons would go. That's the purpose of all this. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to grab this line and I'm just going to bring it up. Now as you can see, as we bring this up, or it's fine if we bring it up, because what will happen is when we bring this up, the bottom corner, let's move this across so we can see a bit better. As we move it up, the squares just go around. Now as you can see, there's a bit of the square is not a complete square, as you can see, and that's just because as the square goes around it does that. So yeah, we could have a 3 millimeter here, but then it's not I want to try and get this square right in that corner. So I'm happy just to, whoops. I'm happy to just have that little piece there, and that's fine. And then what we can do is we can just get this rectangle here, copy and paste, and then bring it over on here. And as you can see, our line has changed slightly as well on this side here. So as you can see, as we go down, as we move up, one goes down and then the other one goes up. So what I'll do, I'll just try and even these out. So I think that's probably the best we can do, where we have these at least very much lined up together. So if I was to just get this line here, so we're about 3.4 from the center, and that's completely fine, 0.4. So as you can see, our squares are very lined up together. And what we're going to do now is we're going to just cover these lines up here. And to do that, what we're going to do is I'm simply going to firstly select the lines here on the rectangle, and we're going to put them to the bottom. Layer them down to the bottom. And what you can do is you could just simply put them into this rectangle here, and that just removes the lines here. However, we have these two squares here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover these two over with this. So what I'm going to do is just simply place it over. You could try and get a bit more precise or whatever, but what I'm going to do is simply just cover these over, and I'll just make a little box here for them, and I'm going to just change the line color to white. Oops, going to change the line color to white, and then bring this text here, and then I'm going to place this over the top of the rectangle there, so the line here. And we probably don't even need a line actually, we can just simply go to the stroke of the line and then just remove the line completely. Probably don't even need a white line. And as you can see, we've removed, or haven't removed, we've just covered over this line. So what we have a nice little pattern. There we go. And then we're gonna group these together. So simply just highlight over them and then click group. And then we have all of these have gone to a group. Ungroup them, simply just right click and click ungroup all, and then we've ungrouped them. We'll group them together. Now the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to make the front pocket of this piece. And what I'm going to do is just simply, I might just copy paste and then move this over and then ungroup all, and then we'll just delete a bunch of these. Oops. So delete that rectangle, and now we're left with the main rectangle here. And the height of this was 80. And there we go. Now what you could do, you could just simply make a new rectangle, but I'll just copied and pasted this one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to line up as best we can this one into that corner. And then what we can do is we can see where our pricking irons would go with our front pocket here. Now what I found quite interesting is when we did the graph paper, the front pocket line was passing in between the stitch holes very easily. However, on this one here, the line, as you can see, the front pocket line here is just underneath the square here. And this is where I'm just going to get the pen tool to select here. And we're going to just simply get a straight line. And I'll change this to black. Increase the stroke to 2, to 1. And simply just put the height 2.82. So if I just get a little line that's 2.82, the pricking iron will be missing the line here. However, I'm just going to keep it how it is, just because in the graph paper said that the pricking iron will miss the front pocket, and then in the prototype stage we can just assess this to see if this is accurate or not. But in any case, I'm just going to leave it how it is, and that is our front pocket with our main piece. And we don't actually need to do these lines here because we don't want these lines to be clashing, because as you can see, when we line these up here, the lines can actually differ on the front pocket. But just for ease, for example, just leave the pattern how it is. So we don't actually need to do these stitch holes here, because if we do, the stitch holes don't line up. I think with the stitch lines here, because there is a corner here, it messes up the lines. So just completely delete these. Now the next thing you're going to do is I'm going to show you how to do a corner radius. And as you can see, we're running out of room. We could move our patterns over here. However, what we can do is if we click on the Artboard tool and then click Insert Artboard, the background now changes to white, or more of a grey sort of background. And if we insert Artboard, we have another artboard, another A4 piece of paper. And as you can see in the Artboard one, we have what's there. So then the layers have changed. So we'll have the Artboard layers, and then we can just select, we can click on this arrow and then see the different groups, etc. And what you can do is you can move your patterns over here, and then you can see them quite easily. What we're going to do in the Artboard 2 is we're going to make a pattern. And the width of this pattern is going to be a square. So we're going to do 90 by 90. And we'll just simply change the stroke to a solid line, move this to a 1, and then there we go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to select the corner tool here. As you can see, these white boxes have popped up. We can just simply click on a corner and then bring the radius in like this. And then there's different options with different radiuses. And if you remember when I showed you how to do that corner radius, we had to do that big process, whereas with this, simply just go 40, and there you go. You have a 40mm radius. So you can simply just make a 40mm radius, and then you can make a 30, and then 20, and then 10. So as you can see, we've just made 4 different radiuses very easily, very quickly, and again, and also very precisely. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to this text box here, and the difference between these two is that the artistic text tool just allows you to type wherever you want, whereas this one here is your classic text box, so you can make a text box and then type along it. It's up to you which one you want to use. Now I'll just remove this text box. I'm just going to select the artistic tool, and I'm going to type in 40mm. I'm going to type in 40mm, and then rotate over. And with rotation, you can easily just rotate it in 100 or 360 degrees. What you can do is if you hold shift, you can get precise, 90 degrees, back to 0, 45. Whereas when you don't hold shift, you have to try and manually find 45. If you do hold shift, it goes straight to 45 very easily. And up here you can change the font, change the size, bold it, italic it, underline it. You can change if it's in the middle, all that sort of stuff. What I'm going to do is just simply copy and paste this. I'm going to copy, paste, move it over in here, and then I'm going to type 30. For this corner. And this is just going to be easy to see. Copy, paste. And there you go, we have some radius corners completed. Now, a little tool that you can use is called a pen tool. Now, what we'll do, we'll come back to this one here, and just say you want to make a curved wallet, for example. So just say if you don't want to have a completely straight line, there are a couple things that you can do. If you want to make your own line, for example, you can get this pen tool and have the rectangle selected, and then you can go from here, then select the node tool, and then you can make your own curves and whatever you want. You could also just manually go from here to here, but it's much better to have the rectangle selected and then go from one line to the next. Now, what you can do is just copy, paste, and then half of 79 is 39.5. So what we have this is in the middle. And what we can do is just get our pen tool. And we can go from here to here. And what you can do is just get the node tool and then zoom into the middle. And then grab roughly in the middle. So I think the closer you get, the more options you have. So I'm going to hold shift. And then as you can see, as we hold shift, we can move it down. So I'll just get it in a straight line. As I hold shift, I can just hold control and then scroll out. And then you can go down or wherever you want to go. So just say you want to make a curve like this. What you can then do is just delete this. Now then you have this line up here, and this is where we're going to break the line. So what you can do is just select the rectangle, right click and go to convert to curves. What we're then going to do is select the node tool, and we're going to select this box here, and you can select anywhere along the line as well. It's not just you don't have to select here, you can just select anywhere you want. We're going to hold shift and then select the box here. And that just means we've selected both of these. We're then going to go up here and go break. And as you can see, it's broken these two here. Now we have another curve, no, that's there. So we can just select this curve here and then select the move tool. And then as you can see, we've removed that line. And then that's how you can break the line. If you want to, you can just simply just undo it. And just undo what we just did. And you can do the exact same thing with shapes. So for example, you have a circle, or you can just choose another shape if you want. And same thing again. We'll just make this exactly the same width first. So 79. And just say we want the pocket to be there, for example. To break this, what you can do is simply make sure it's convert to curves, node tool, select there, make sure it's selected, go over on this side here, and you just want to make sure that both these are selected, and then break curve. And that's how you can break the curve. Now, so that's how you can make curves. Again, there is one more option I'll show you, and I'm just copying and pasting 39.5. And what we're going to do is select the rectangle here, get the pen tool, go to the top here, and I'll go here. Get the node tool, and then I'll simply just place this here. Might just move this up, so if I hold shift, it maintains on that line. Have a slight, there we go. And to copy and paste, Control C, Control V, and then we'll just move this over to 39.5. And it's a bit of a struggle to get it. So I'll just go 5 here. And what we want to do is just make sure that these lines up. As you can see, it's not lined up in the middle, so I'll just move this over by 1, and there we go. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to group these together. If you hold Control, you can individually go over what's in the middle. Whereas if you hold Shift, it selects whatever is below this one here. That's just one thing to know. To select multiple here, you just hold Shift. Whereas on here, you just need to be careful. If you hold Shift, it selects. So if you select this one and then hold Shift and then select this one, it will select these two in the middle. Whereas if you hold Control on here, so you select this one holding Control and then hold Control here, you'll skip whatever is in between, whatever's in between. What we're going to do is just group these together, and then again we're going to delete this and then just select this one here, and then there you go. Now we have another piece, and then we can just see where it ends up on between our stitches, and then that's how you can make a curved line. But because we're not going to be doing any curved lines, we're just going to leave it how it is. I can just undo and then get that line back joined up. Yep, there we go. Now the final thing we're going to do is I'm going to do one more artboard. And this is going to be actually in a PDF pattern, so you can actually select and use for your printouts. So you can have your own radius corners. The next thing I'm going to do is we're going to make a brand new set of patterns. And this is going to be 90 by 350. Now what we have here is we have a little dilemma. So if you're printing out patterns and they're longer than the A4 piece of paper, what can you do? So as you can see, we have 90 wide by 350 long. And what I would recommend doing is copying and pasting this. So you have two of them. So what you can do is just copy and paste and then bring this up, and we're going to go to 240. And then what I'm going to do is just group these together, copy, paste, bring these over. And then what we're going to do is when we print these out, we're going to cut and remove this line here, and then use this piece, cut, and then remove this line, and then remove this piece here, and then use that piece. And then when we glue these two together onto some card, lined up, you'll have this piece of leather in its full, this piece of card in its full length. And then you can use this as a pattern to trace around. As you can see, these are just some ways that you can design patterns in Affinity Designer. Of course, there are going to be more in-depth tutorials online that you can watch. As you practice over time and get better at using the design program, you'll find that you can make patterns a lot easier. The next thing I'm going to do in part 3 is print out these pieces of paper, and I'll be gluing these onto some card. So I hope you've enjoyed part 2, and now we'll move on to part 3.